I think childhood, I just loved films and I think it's better than school. I mean, so it was the only escape at that time. There was no television also. And so I used to watch as many films as I could. My parents were not really, my dad especially was not really into about us watching films. Me and my brother, she was not even born that time. I must have been a kid. And so I used to see films like Born Free or Ben-Hur and Hatari. These are the only films my parents used to allow me to go. But then slowly I learned how to kind of go on my own and play hooky and so on. So I think I just loved films and I didn't know what directing, what filmmaking was all about. I just thought it kind of, there's something which is a good escape and you get lost in other worlds and so on. I think the place where most of our learning, because I was telling my brother and a couple of people yesterday, there's so many movies we watch now and there's so many modes of watching movies, I mean on the laptop and this and that. But the scenes that you vividly remember are actually scenes which you see at a very young age, I mean, North by Northwest, Jewel Thief and Sholay, Diva, these are movies where I remember vividly. But there'll be, a movie I saw maybe last week, but it's kind of come and gone through my head. I may have even liked it, but it's still comparatively not as strong an impact. And gradually, as you grow older, then I wanted to be a journalist, but I used to have a very bad stammer at that time, so I was not I was actually a bad journalist, and I was working for a couple of magazines where I just couldn't, so after a few months I was out of that, and then I joined Mukul Anand as an assistant. I had met him during one of my interviews with him, and I said I want to learn more about films. He said, come and join me, there's no money, but there will not be money, but come and work, and so I kind of, on Ed Bar, which is his second film, Raj Berlin Temple. I worked on that and a little bit. Then I joined the Film Institute. It was actually a kind of when I was with Mukul. I got in. I just gave the entrance exam as a lark. I just felt okay. A couple of my friends were doing it, so I also went. Then it was a bit of a chance factor. The day of the interview, I decided I won't join because I was enjoying working with Mukul, and even though I was a complete, novice at that time, I was kind of enjoying the experience of it. And we were shooting in Khandala, for a song for Edbar. And for some reason, the shoot got cancelled for 2 days. I forgot why. But so because the unit was already there, the main artists and all went off, but we were all kind of staying there. So I said, since I live in Pune and I have a house in Pune and so staying in Khandala, let me go home. And that was the day of the interview actually. So if the shoot was there, I would not have gone, So I remember, because I was working for a trade magazine for some time, so I'd met a lot of filmmakers. I'd met Saeed Mirza and even Mukul. Mukul, I asked him, should I join or not? And he said, look, he is a very far-sighted kind of a person, and he said, look, working with me, it'll take you a few years to make your own film. Whereas we join the institute, you get to make films immediately, in a sense, exercises and so on. And also he foresaw the advent of television and how big it's going to become. So he said it's important to have a formal learning, which many people didn't have, but it's good to always have that. And he said just do it as a And so he kind of almost told me go and do it. And then I asked Saeed Mirza, I remember, is it good to join a film institute or learn on the job? And he said one line which I never I don't know where I stand. He said an institute will polish pebbles and dim diamonds. So I said okay.
How did you find the training at the FTII?
FTII is fantastic simply because you get to watch a lot of films, plus you're with people who are constantly, it's the whole, your whole batch and your whole institute it's only about, it just revolves around movies, and so there's a certain amount of formal learning which happens, and there's also a lot of learning which happens in an overall sense, because you're watching films, you're discussing films, most importantly you're also making your exercises. So each exercise you do, you of course go in thinking you're going to make a masterpiece and you end up with some really not so good stuff. And but I think from those mistakes you learn, and we keep learning from mistakes actually. No, I am not really. I write sometimes, but I'm not as prolific as I should be or as disciplined as I should be. I do write, but it's like more out of compulsion than choice. Sometimes I enjoy writing, of course, but I don't, like I said, I don't have the discipline to sit and write. And I also, the shooting process actually is equally fun for me. So I take time because, once I finish a movie, then to write another, and then by the time it gets made, it takes time. So I'm now trying to I mean, work with other people and collaborate or work on. I'm just trying to do that, and I'm also, of course, writing my own thing also. Writing is fun, but yeah, it needs major discipline, which I need to get. After FTI, I mean, I was in ISRO in Ahmedabad for a while, for about 2 years. They were making documentaries, and they had a kind of small unit where you could make. I mean, it was on health and on various kind of social issues. And so that was there for a couple of years. After that, I came back and actually for a long time I didn't do much. I used to write for BP Singh, CID episodes and Ahat and so on. My brother was of course writing the bulk of them, but occasionally he used to be like not free or they needed a story immediately and kind of thing. So, and that used to kind of take care of a few expenses and so on. And then I started directing some episodes of Ahat and CID. And but yeah, it's almost 10 years where I was trying to make a movie. My interest was features, but it was not so easy to do that at that time. I made one film, Raman Raghav, which was it never got released. It was for a company called Media Classic, who were making Marathi television serials. So they wanted to do something in collaboration with the Bombay cops. So they said, okay, take some of the successful cases and kind of do a video, kind of a featurette out of each. So there were 4 or 5 stories that they had offered me. One was Charles Sobraj, how he was caught when he was in an escape from Tihar jail. Then there was a couple of such older cases and so on. And Raman Raghav was one of them. So when I read about that, then I did some kind of research on Raman Raghav. I found him a very fascinating character. And it's probably India's first serial killer. So, and I had a lot of access to the cops who had actually worked on that case and so on. So I met them and made a kind of I got all the material, and I remember I'd written a script which was very dramatic, and then a couple of days before the actual shoot, and I'd spoken to Raghuveer Yadav also, but I had not narrated the script to him. I had told him what really happened. I mean, what was Raman Raghav's story, and almost like this is what his life was, and this is how he was caught, and what he did, and why he did it, and so on. And one of the people I had met during the research was a psychiatrist who had actually kind of examined him and was treating him. And he told me one thing which made sense to me. He said, look, he's not a criminal, he's actually a sick person. It was a disease what he had. So he had paranoid schizophrenia. So after that, when I went back to my script, I found it very fake. It was like he had some kind of. I mean, the murders were kind of dramatic and so on. Whereas when what he was doing there was no drama. It was just a kind of a man compelled to do something, and so all that. I mean, so I just felt the script was completely wrong. So I told the EP, I said, look, I mean, the shoot was fixed. So I just said, okay, I'm not going to use this script. I'm going to just shoot. What happened, So of course parts of the script. So I just removed all the fakery in the script, So whatever now is there in the film is actually exactly what happened. And then Raghuveer Yadav, we just kind of made it like it's not fiction, it's fact, but we treated it like a in a fiction sense. We told it like a story. That was a film which actually got me some amount of. Ramu saw it, and Ramu then asked me to write for him. So and so on. So I mean, writing was like kind of I got into. Like with fits and starts. No, I have actually written, I was, for example, writing a couple of scripts for Ramu. But then what happened at that time was, one script, midway he would say, no, actually this is not kind of what I want to do right now, we'll do something else. And then, so in fact there was one story on Encounter Cops also, he wanted me to write, and I did some research, he gave me a lot of material and all that, and at some point, he said, you only make this film, I said, oh, I'd love to, and so on. And then, I think Company was just being released, and he said, look, this is not the right time to make that film. There is some objection. They really don't want, the cops don't want to, want a film like this, so wait for some time and then do it. And maybe he saw like I was disappointed or whatever. Then he offered me, he said, there's one more story, if you want, just read it. And he gave me Ek Hasina Teen. It was a novelette, it was not a script proper, it was more like a novelish kind of a writing, written by a first timer. So I read that and I liked a lot of elements in that. So I said I'll do that. And then we all sat and kind of rewrote that and so on. But I've written mostly for television, and either for BP Singh I've written which is like what he directs. Otherwise mostly what I've written is what I do. I have directed. I'm now trying to be prolific. And sometimes what happens like you don't really plan this delay, it just happens. The only thing I can say is, for example, sometimes after you finish a film, you take 6 months to 1 year to write another film, that will take time. But otherwise, no excuse for such long gaps. Not really. I mean, writing is of course a way of making films. The writing by itself there's a lot of joy one can get in that. It's just that for me, because I eventually want to make films and my dream was to make films, so all my writing was focused towards what I could make, I could sell, I could kind of ask somebody to produce it and so on. So once or twice it's happened that somebody has told me, okay, write for them, That's very early, before I even started making my own films. And one of those films, they shot a little bit, then it kind of didn't happen and so on. So there's nothing I can say, okay, these were the scripts I wrote before I started making my own films. I was not a writer first and then a filmmaker. I was actually a bit of both all the time. So.
Your brother is a writer. Any collaborations happening with him?
We keep talking about it. Now what happens is that he's quite a busy writer, and so I think we both want it to happen, and I think it will happen soon. But in fact, whenever he writes something, he'll bounce it off me. And of course, he writes something, and if I'm busy doing something else, then it will take some time. So we have not yet actually sat down and worked on a project. We were supposed to, in fact, on Agent Vinod, he was working with me initially. But then that film was taking its own time in terms of when we were going to start and so on. So at some point he moved off and he said, okay, another time. So we will definitely work together. I mean, it's like having a writer at home and somebody whose work I like. So obviously I will want to work with him soon.
You have a very close relationship with Javed Akhtar. Tell us about it.
It was a screenwriting seminar in Pune which Anjum had organized, I think the first of those things, about 5-6 years back. And so he told me, so there are a lot of people coming and talking about things, so you talk about Salim Javed. So I said, okay, I love Salim Javed's work and I've grown up on that, so I said, okay. And I'd made some notes and so on, and then to my horror in the audience I saw Javed Saab was sitting there, so I said, oh, I was going to kind of, suddenly I was like a little nervous about that. But then, I mean, I was just, I think, and Gayatri also was there in that program, I think. So then I remember just telling some in the audience that, when I was a kid, there used to be this radio programs used to come, and this, all the radio spots, like what we have on TV right now. No? So I remember when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, there was the Zanjeer ka thing used to come, the ad used to come when my dad is shaving and I'm getting ready to go to school. And the other kids are waiting down, and this ad used to come, कि यादों की जंजीर में लिपटा हुआ इंतकाम का शोला, and then the Dil Jalunga song will come, and Prakash Mehra's Zanjeer and so on. So it's kind of I just remembered that, and so that kind of, I think that's what she meant. But otherwise, I mean, I've grown up on Salim Javed's work, Zanjeer and Diwar, Sholay and Trishul, and all these movies. These are the movies, Yadon Ki Barat. All these movies are kind of, I've watched them at a very kind of a formative age, and so they are imprinted in my head, and I think I've watched them many times, because that time they used to be reruns. Each time you want to see it, you have to see it in the hall again, and the movies used to come back in reduced rates and matinee shows and so on. So I've seen all these movies, 20-25 times each, so kind of they all stick in your head, they're tattooed, parts of it are tattooed. So whenever I'm stuck in a scene, me and brother, or even Rajat Arora and all of us, I think, we kind of think of scenes from their movies and stuff like that. Vijayant again, because I used to love Devanand as an actor, and why do I love Devanand as an actor? Because probably I saw Johnny Mera Naam, Jewel Thief and movies like that very early, So at the same time, around this time I'm talking about. So suddenly you find, okay, you're watching a whole lot of movies, but there are some movies that stand out in some manner, and I don't know what that manner is, which is probably the way it's directed, edited and so on, which later on one comes to learn. Once you learn to appreciate the kind of why that film is different, why Teesri Manzil is different from other thrillers and so on. So I think again Vijayanand is somebody whose work is like a textbook education in that sense for me. Vijayanand, Hitchcock, these are people whose work I have liked as a viewer, and then gradually I have tried to understand why those films work so much and so on.
As a writer, Sriram, you have a genre you like to work in?
Not particularly. I've done thrillers so far. Doesn't mean that, there are other genres also I would like to explore. And in fact, I am writing a couple of things in other, but it's not that I'm genre specific. A thriller is, of course, I'm a little more partial towards that. Maybe I like it a little bit more, because when I talk about Hitchcock, Vijayanand and so on, we are talking about, a certain kind of thrillers in their stories. Their stories are mostly thrillers. But even within the thriller, there are so many kinds of thrillers. So I mean, one can do a crime novel or a crime film can explore a whole lot of things which So I don't feel restricted by doing a film in that genre.
What is the process of writing?
Process of writing, I mean, I was saying that I wish I had done 20 films, then I would be able to kind of give some kind of a clear-cut process. Right now it's a little haphazard actually. Right now, all my, so far it's been like that. Where, for example, I was writing for BBC saying it used to be more almost a last moment kind of a thing. Okay, Friday I'll be told, okay, can you give us something we will shoot on Monday and it has to be telecast on, in a week later kind of thing. And the only motivation at that time used to be, okay, I'm going to get, if I write that and crack that, I'll get paid. And that takes care of some kind of, some more time and all that. So that used to be, and then, okay, that's a CID episode. So you're focused kind of mind and you kind of come up with some ideas and then somehow, I mean, in that pressure, one used to come up with sometimes good stuff, sometimes okay type stuff, Then when I was doing films, I mean, like I said, the first film that actually I did, Ek Hasina Thi, was not really my script. It was the script was written by a girl called Pooja Surti. So her script was actually like a novelette, It was like it was there as a kind of it was more like it was not the scenes were not defined. The dialogue was little more. It was more descriptive and so on. But still, the essence of the story was there. That there's a girl who gets conned by a good-looking charmer, and eventually, because of him, she goes to jail. And in jail, she toughens up and takes revenge. That was the broad one line was there. And at that time, I was so kind of desperate to make a movie that I mean, whatever Ramu had given me, I would have said mostly yes. And this luckily was something which had a certain. I mean, what I liked about it was it had a love story in the beginning. It had a jail drama as a section, and it had a revenge story in the end. So it had three different kinds of movies were there within that. So I kind of jumped at the chance, and then I told Ramu, yeah, I will do it. And then Ramu said, okay, you all start fleshing it out and so on. And that time, then we sat for about 2-3 months, and we went over the whole thing. And the whole idea of that film, when I see it now, what was there and what became a lot of the writing, a lot of the thing happened on the way, as we were writing it. Right now, I'm in a state where, in a place where I have to, there's one script I've got, but I feel like, there are 2 or 3 projects which I just want to, on the one hand, recharge after Agent Vinod, then, watch movies and so on. On the other hand, I'm also trying to write 2 scripts at a time. One I'm writing myself, and one I'm writing with somebody else. So I am in that stage, it's a very early stage right now. So I'm in the stage where I've got the broad story and I'm just putting down all kinds of scenes that I feel maybe can happen in that movie. And I've not yet started the hardcore writing. I'm just putting down, what I call a shoebox of ideas, So I know the story is set in, say, the late 50s and 60s. It's a story set there, it's a thriller. And now how, I'm telling you I can only tell you so much because after that everything else goes into a vague territory of haze, So I'm trying to kind of put down, okay, this can happen, this kind of a thing can happen, this is something I can try and include. And soon, once I have enough, the shoebox is kind of full, I'll start, and somewhere the story is also evolving in the meanwhile. I'm just kind of trying to, at some point I'll start writing it, as a script, as a first draft kind of thing, but that will be after about a fortnight or so. Then I think I'll just try and write one version which is right up to the end. That is the way like Johnny Gadar also was like that. So then at some point you say, look, sit and write one whole draft, and good, bad, whatever the draft is there till the end, which usually is not good. It's got some good ideas and all that, but then because it's not working, you got something to improve on, So it's a lot of rewriting actually. See, I'll try and give you an example from Ek Hasina Thi. So, for example, Ek Hasina Thi very clearly was, like I said, the basic premise is what I said. The girl is kind of cheated by somebody and she goes to jail and she escapes from jail and takes revenge. Very kind of a normal one-line. I cannot tell somebody this is a very novel one-line. Okay, we have seen movies like that. So, but what I liked is the initial part was a love story. Now, the love story, then I remember Pooja, me and Ramu, initially me and Pooja used to sit and work out scenes, okay, what happens, how does he meet her, how does the relationship develop, and and we thought, okay, we were writing a certain version of it, which was probably like a very, very Yash Chopra love story kind of a thing, initially, the very first version we wrote. And then Ramu felt, why are you keeping it so kind of, regular, why don't you go a little more edgier in that, and then he gave us a couple of leads on that. In fact, a lot of the initial love story scenes, the way, for example, there's one scene which Ramu had suggested to us, where she's coming out of a supermarket and some thief snatches a bag and goes off. And this guy goes in, the hero, I mean the main character, he's not a hero, but the character, Saif, he goes and kind of catches that thing and catches that guy and gives it back to her. And now then he says, okay, she says thank you, and he says, would you like to have a cup of coffee with me, and now if that scene had just stopped there, it's one thing. But then Ramu will say, okay, why don't you make it like, oh, that guy was very short, that's why I could, I could do it. He kind of self, he kind of makes fun of it, Similarly, there's a scene where some guys try to hassle her and Saif comes and hits one of them, breaks his arm. And later on he says, oh shit, I broke his arm, I should pay more money because I'd only paid them for just to hassle you, kind of thing. So you never know whether he's kind of lying or whether that really happened or not. So this little idea which Ramu made that whole love story little edgy and little kind of more suited to that character. So stuff like that. For example, again, when we were doing the movie, I remember we were going up to a point, we had reached, the script was up to a point, I told Ramu, look Ramu, this is a thriller and movie has, so far we are almost about 40 minutes into the movie and there's not even one something thrilling in the movie. So people may just think it's a love story and so where does the thriller come in? We should try and inject something here, since Saif, Karan, the character played by Saif is a kind of a mafia related guy, we should have some hint of that somewhere, and he said, yeah, but what can we do? And we kept trying to think of some scene which will not look like an extraneous scene which is just put there or just like a establishing or expository kind of a scene, So then I remember Ramu was talking to us and he said, you remember Godfather Part 3, there's a scene where these two are in bed and suddenly they hear some sound and there's a guy waiting there, something like that. So we were talking about something like that, what if something like that will happen? So okay, if a guy comes there, then okay, it's a kind of an obvious strange thing, it's very too similar to Godfather Part 3 kind of thing. So then we thought, I don't remember whose idea it was. It may have been Pooja's or Ramu's because it wasn't mine. Where these two, Urmila and Saif are in bed, and then she goes to the kitchen, and suddenly there's a scream, and we hold on Saif, and we wonder what happened there. And he goes out and he finds that she's scared because she saw a rat in the house, So now that's a kind of a false alarm, but it also gets a laugh. But I thought, okay, maybe this is not the thriller scene I was looking for, but there's some edge to this, But then thanks to that one scene, we got the whole motive of the rats in the movie, So then we said, okay, she's scared of rats. It kind of, I'm terrified of rats myself. So I said, okay, this is one thing one can use because she's going to go to jail. And even there, there can be a rat there. And then that's something which we used in the absolute climax, it was very kind of it's magical when you suddenly get one thing for some reason and the whole thing kind of 3 more scenes fill in there and it all looks like very organized and planned. But if we hadn't had that conversation about Godfather Part 3, we would not have got this sequence, So these things are I think the process of writing is when real ideas come in. Otherwise, what you got is pretty much what anybody else can write, But in the writing somewhere, if you're, I think, alert enough and you keep getting those terrific little ideas that come, which otherwise writing is such a painful and kind of a lonely kind of thing. So sometimes one good idea can give you the momentum to, and the charge to go ahead and do more and so on. That was actually written, that was one script I wrote even before my first film was made, I actually saw Reservoir Dogs, Tarantino's film, and then I loved it very much, and I was reading about some article of Tarantino, an interview where he said that, I was so keen to make a film that, I thought I'll make this film in a very low budget with newcomers and make it in under $50,000 and so on. So I thought that's a good route to take. Of course, he then met the script, went out to Harvey Keitel, and it became a kind of, not a big film, but at least it became a film with a lot of known actors and stars who were willing to work on the film because they loved the script. So I thought it's a good idea to try and make a very low budget kind of thriller which you can actually make with you don't need big stars for that, and you just go with somebody new and make it as cheap as you can. That was the idea. And of course, Reservoir Dogs. Then I am a big fan of the film noir, of the French film noir and the American 40s crime thrillers and so on. Jean-Pierre Melville and all those movies. So So that was the space, the world I was trying to work on, and so I had a whole list of movies: Rififi, The Killing, Kubrick's Killing, Blood Simple, and these are all small crime films. So I thought, okay, then again we said, let's take a simple idea of a caper that goes wrong, and slowly, I mean, bit by bit, you try to make it a movie, a story that works. So I had that story much before I had met Ramu or made Ek Hasina Thi. But I happened to make, I mean, I couldn't, actually, I had the script, but I didn't have any producer, I didn't have any backing for that. Even though it was a low budget thing, I really couldn't make it because that was, as a first one, nobody was interested in a movie which is kind of about a new guy who's not even known, who's committing these murders, and it's a kind of a very dark kind of film. Dark, eventually, so it never got made at that point. After Hasina, it became much easier for me to make that film. I also remember I had narrated it to Kundan Shah because at that time I wanted Saif to play the character. This is much before Hasina, so and Kundan was, I think, working with Saif on some film. So I said I'd like to meet him, and if you can just I'd like to narrate the script. And he said first you narrate to me, and so me and Kundan were chatting once in my house and having a drink, and so I told him this is a story, and he didn't like it. He said he said it's just a plot you have got. You don't have any story here. It's not a film. There's no characters really. I said, yeah, it's an interesting plot. So he had one line which was, it made a lot of sense to me. He said, a plot has no life, and he said, life has no plot. So something like that he said, So I think what I got from that, what he said is like, I mean, okay, there's your plot. The plot should be an excuse to explore characters and make it much more than that, So then, of course, Johnny Gadar was just even the title was Johnny Gadar, but it was not like there was no. I mean, it was not the film that it became later on, because it was much more very plot driven and only plot driven. There was nothing else. Then after Hasina, I said, okay, let me take that story and see whether I can. Of course, rewriting it after so many years, you also see that okay, what he meant, and so then I started giving the character of Dharanji a lot of, he's got a wife, he's got this, and then each person I said, let me look at them as people, and forget the plot for the time being. Who are these people if there was no plot? And we came up with a whole lot of scenes with Vinay Pathak and Zakir and so on, and then it kind of the plot and the characters kind of meshed together. Vinod was because of a meeting with Saif where both of us were discussing spy films and films we liked as kids, and spy films, of course, Bond and all that we were talking about, and then he talked about Agent Vinod, the original Mahendra Sandhu film, and he said, have you seen that? I said, of course, I love that, and he said, oh, I also love that movie, and let's try and do something like that, and so I didn't want to do Agent Vinod, I didn't want to remake that film for sure, and that is a very kind of a spoofy, if you watch it today, it's even then it was a kind of a spoofy Euro spy Bond kind of a movie, So I said, okay, let's take the title, because I thought the title was very retro and cool and so on, and I said, let's just take the title and make our own character, make our own contemporary kind of a character. It's today's film, it's a different story, only the title was borrowed from that movie. And both I also love spy films, and well, Agent Vinod has not worked. So it's not worked to the extent that we wanted it to work. It's not worked. Frankly, it's not done like what I thought it would do. But that's part of the game. But we did spend a long time and worked very hard on that movie.
Why do you think it did not work as you thought it would?
I see. After when a thing doesn't work, every answer seems to have some value. So I really can't say. I would say, yeah, there were, I think when the film was being written, I did know it was a little long, little bloated, but I couldn't crack that. So because the story was already defined in a certain way. So I said, okay, it'll be about 2 hours, 40 minutes or so, but it is long. It should have been a 2-hour film for an action thriller, spy thriller kind of movie. And, but I said, okay, if people enjoy it, 2 hours, 40 minutes is it's not like, and today, Anurag's film is 5 hours, and it's still, when you watch it, you watch it. It's not about time and length and so on. But I think I don't know the real reason, but I think I did try to analyze, and then the other thing we did was, I had a co-writer for that movie, a guy called Arijit Biswas, and so we spent some time trying to think of a good story, but then we felt, let's take a very standard kind of a story. What does, in most of the spy films, what happens? The agent saves the world, unless it's a unless it's, I mean, if it's a Bond film, I mean, Bond films are not about stories, they're about sequences, about moments and, locations and a whole lot of other trappings. It's not really about, I mean, if you look at the story of Casino Royale, it's quite a nonsensical story. I mean, I can point out more flaws in it than I have in my own film. But then it doesn't matter because it's about the rush and the excitement that you get. And the title Agent 1 promises that. So I think now, when the film got released, many people expected a very Johnny Gadar kind of story. At least among the I think the people who have seen Johnny Gadar and liked it, they expected that kind of a movie. So this wasn't clever in that sense. That may be one of the reasons. So there are quite a few reasons I can think of after the movie is not done well, but I really won't be able to pinpoint. And maybe there are a couple of places where there was a flaw in the script, which for some reason I couldn't crack. So I kind of let it go. And the only flaw I can think of is when, for example, there's a scene where Kareena goes up and when she suspects that this one villain is in some place, when there are so many cops with her, she doesn't tell the cops, she goes on her own. That was one place where I felt on paper itself it was weak, but sometimes since on weak on paper you try your best to get over that as a director, you try to get solve that problem. So but maybe sometimes it doesn't get solved, and sometimes I don't know. I really can't make out why the movie didn't work. But after it's over, I mean, whenever I meet people, some people say, okay, it didn't work because of this. I listen to them, and something will. What do you say? I mean, I've obviously learned something from that. Let's see. All my experience is probably from films. All that I know is from films. So it kind of comes in like that. But the overt referencing to movies is something which is, sometimes I do it like, because it's like fun, and sometimes it's not even like, even if you don't get the reference, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't stop the story, it should not kind of be in your face, or it should not be, a film should not be, I don't believe a film should be like with in-jokes where, only me and a few people get it. That's not a virtue. That's okay, you can do all that, but it's not going to help the movie in the overall sense. So, I mean, in Johnny Gadar, it was kind of, it just happened. In fact, after I saw some of the reviews, I said, oh shit, there are so many references which I didn't even think, okay, people are going to make a list of these references and so on. It just happened. Like when we thought, in the initial script, for example, there was no Parwana in the movie, But when I had seen Parwana as a kid, I remember that idea was very, very nice, okay, that this guy takes a train, then goes back and flies back and creates an alibi for himself and so on. So that was part of my, when I was writing Johnny Gadar, I knew that scene, that idea was there. Then I was telling Pooja, who was my editor at that time, who was the writer of Hasina, I was telling her, what if there's a scene where these two they were in bed making love, and suddenly, the remote gets switched on by, accidentally, and Parwana is going on TV. Just as she started laughing, it'll be fun, So we said, okay. Then that evolved into a scene where he's actually sitting and watching the movie, and that's where he formulates a plan, because otherwise, how does one tell an audience that, okay, suddenly he decided that he will steal the money. How do you visually do that, So then this Parwana kind of came in. So once Parwana came in, that kind of became something. Then similarly, even for example, the script was ready, Neil had read it, it was called Johnny Gadar, and I met Neil's dad, Nitin Mukesh, and he said, oh, read the script and it's quite good and all that. But tell me, why is this movie called Johnny Gadar, So I said, no reason except that I like Johnny Veram, and this guy is a Gaddar. Yeah, I know, but why Johnny Gadar? Because he said, I was telling some friend of mine, he said, Johnny Gadar, it's an odd name, and so why is it called Johnny? Why can't you give it some, simpler, better name, I love the title Johnny Gadar, and I said, but at the same time, he had a vague point, and that point was kind of something I felt like I should answer, But I didn't know how, and the film was already shooting actually. And then at some point, there was one scene where Neil, this character Vikram, goes to some hotel in Pune and he has to stay, register himself. So that guy asked him, what's your name? And normally he would have said some name. He would have said whatever. And he wouldn't give his own name and address, but he would have given some name. So there I thought, okay, suppose at reception mein that guy is watching, Johnny Veram keeps coming on Sony, and whenever it's on, suddenly I'll start watching it, So what if that guy is watching it, and one of my favorite scenes in Johnny Veram is that, the confrontation between Pran and Devanand on top of a hill, where they realize कि they're actually brothers, and during the fight, the whatever wrestling bout which was there in the beginning of the movie also. So बोल क्या नाम है तेरा, that scene was going on. So I just kind of suddenly clicked कि okay, Neil can just say my name is Johnny, and that guy says something like he is a Maharashtrian Adnav guy, and says G, and Neil doesn't know Marathi, so G and says Johnny G, which becomes Johnny Gaddar. Now again, it's a little magic that happens sometimes when you get an idea and you feel damn happy about it, but it doesn't always happen. There's no trend or anything. I think most writers, most directors, if you ask them, I think they would prefer to be given a script which is like superb and they just have to shoot it, and enhance it in whatever manner they can. But now you don't get it so easily. I mean, so now there are most writers eventually become directors. So it is like Abbas Saibala began as a writer, became a director. I think other than Sridhar and a couple of people, most of them are people who start writing and then they become directors. So I don't know whether it's a trend or not or anything like that, but I think as a director, I mean, see, we like both writing is great in its own way and directing is great, but for example, if you have a script or a subject which is like interesting to me, why would I not do it? I would love to do it. So it's not that I will only direct what I write. Happy Birthday is a subject which is very close to me, and we were supposed to do it 2 or 3 years back with Ramesh Sippy, but what happened is that at that time there was some date issue between the actors, and I was not ready with the climax. Most important, that was the problem. I didn't have the last 30%, I was not happy with that. So I said, okay, I told Ramesh ji ki I can shoot up to this point and then it'll get cracked, but I don't have it right now. So he was a little worried, okay, how will you, suppose something changes and so on. So then he said, let's do it later. Then later on I did kind of solve it, but by then I had lost my dates and so on. But that's a film I want to do right now, but it's not on the immediate, because there's still time for that. Right now I'm trying to do something which is also a thriller, which is, right now I'm actually writing, so I've got, luckily I've got 3 or 4 projects, 3 or 4 producers who are interested in working with me, so I'm just kind of making spending some time watching movies, writing my own things, and then maybe in August I'll start, okay, I'll do this first and that first. And so.
How much time do you take to write a subject?
See, because I've not done too much, each of those films there's no defined time. Now this time I'll probably know, okay, will I take 3 months or 6 months? But otherwise Vinod took the longest, I think. It took about 6 to 9 months to get a first version out, because that time also included a lot of, I would say research and reading and, false starts and so on. At some point we decided, okay, we are going to go for this kind of a story. This is the character, this is the girl's character, this is the bad guy, and then we began writing it. And then Vinod was mostly, for me it was about sequences, it was not about the story really. And it was a movie which most people I think didn't even, it was meant for as much for kids, it was, the title is such, it's Agent Vinod. It doesn't mean it's not a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy where I can go for a very, kind of a serious examination of what a raw agent would be. This was Agent Vinod, means he's going to be a fun raw agent. He's like if there was an Indian Bond, what would that Bond be? So that was the idea. So okay, I'm not answering your question. I'm just talking more about Agent Vinod, where, for example, I was very clear in the beginning that this is not going to be an adults only film, because both my earlier films were not for kids. And so I deliberately kind of kept the violence, for example, on a very kind of a fun level, and even torture, for example, when he's tortured, he's given a truth serum. Otherwise they would probably break his knuckles and do, all kinds of things to a spy, to get information from him. But here I went for a little more kind of a fun approach, which I think a lot of people, especially some critics, all felt that, okay, it's a very, it didn't have the cleverness of a movie like Johnny. So it didn't have, of course. It was not meant to be, but then that's perceptions. I don't teach scriptwriting. I think sometimes I go and just meet them. Usually what I do is I share my experiences, So if I show a film, I think what is useful to them, if at all, is that okay, what it was, what it becomes, what evolution, how does the scene change, why we have shot it like that. All these things are kind of I think what I am able to talk, because I don't have a very academic approach to. I don't think how do you teach writing? You know, it's like how do you teach somebody to tell a joke? You know, just be able to do it. You know, and of course, I do tell people that I meet a lot of writers. I get a lot of scripts to read, but out of 10, maybe 8 are bad, you know, or not readable or whatever. I would say that simply because many people are still. I don't know what the answer for that is of it, but I feel there is a lot of rigor and there is a lot of rewriting which has to happen. You know, I mean, many people I feel they write a version and they feel that's it. You know, and whereas maybe there's a germ of an idea in that, maybe there's something good, but I think for me writing is rewriting. I mean, I write till the day I'm shooting that scene, it's still open for improvement. You know, so which is one reason why I don't believe in that completely bound script. You know, I kind of keep it a little. One door open all the time, so that if I feel something better can happen, there is a chance. Of course, I'm not saying that suddenly tomorrow I'll say I want a giraffe on the set. I won't say that, but I'm saying within the scene, within the dialogue, it can improve to a large extent, because I feel maybe in Vinod overdid that. I don't know. Sometimes you also you should know when to stop. I think a scriptwriter must definitely. For me, it was very simple that in my earlier films I love songs in movies, but. Hasina didn't really have a scope for any songs in the sense, we didn't go for that conventional approach of a love story, but Hasina did have a background song, so, and Johnny Gadar had a lot of music in it, but didn't have any kind of the songs in the usual sense. Even Agent Vinod, if you look at it, I knew one thing, I had to have music in this movie because it's an expensive movie. So I didn't want to write a script where, after that I'm told, okay, you must put 4 songs and where do I put them, so. While writing itself, we were very clear, okay, this can be a song situation and this can be a song situation. Of course, if you see in that film, most of the songs are happening while scenes are unfolding. So there is no lip sync song in the sense of the hero suddenly bursting out into a song. We didn't have that kind of a song situation in Agent Vinod also. But yeah, I did think of each of the songs had a certain placement, and there was a story unfolding at that time. I can give you lots of examples of movies which earlier movies used to have that. Now all the 70s movies used to have, like for example, I think if you take a movie like Guide, if you remove the songs, the movie will just collapse. It just will not, because the songs are telling you so much about the character, the story, and so on. So Guide is a great film, but I'm saying I love music in films. It's just that this kind of movies I do, it's not. I can't suddenly have my hero burst into a song. People have done that. Rangila has done that beautifully. It's a very realistic film, except the songs are like, it's treated like a musical. So, one has to find your method to do it.